Hi, and welcome to the New Property Show. I'm Steve McManaman. In this show, we'll be joined by Kyle from Link One Financial. He'll be discussing with us complex lending. Greg Ernie from Methven Professionals will be talking to us about the real estate market and currently the buzz around real estate and what's happening. Gary Brown, part of our regular segment, will be talking to us about the Hatcher Way. And finally, we'll be hearing from our panel. I'd like to welcome Kyle from Link One Financial. Thanks for coming on the New Property Show. Kyle, you're a broker that specialises in complex lending, first home buyers, investment strategies. More importantly, how'd you get started?
So it's been an interesting journey for me. Thanks for having me, first of all, before we jump into that. But for me, it's 18 years or 17 years in banking, decided to start my own thing to see what we could do differently for customers, because I felt like we were always limited in the banks by what we could potentially do to help customers grow within their own, I guess, businesses and also personally for their strategies that they wanted to put into place. So 16 years in Commonwealth Bank, followed by a couple of years out at the moment.
So you're working by yourself at the moment, you've built a team around you.
So small team at the moment, so it's me, I've got one full-timer and then someone 3 days a week who sits in behind me. I'm the, I guess what you would call the face. I see and speak to all the customers personally and they sit there to support out the back end, making sure things happen in a timely manner so we deliver on our promises to our customers.
Being a broker, what do you most enjoy about it?
I think the fact that there's always a solution for a customer. There's lots of times where in my previous job, we'd hit a roadblock and it'd just be like, on your way, we can't do anything else. Where I am now, there's always a way for me to look at different ways that I can make it so that the customers are actually going to get what they need, whether it's where they want to be initially, but it means that we can put different strategies in place to maybe get them there in 2 years, but they're still getting that dream property or that investment property that they're after.
So if your clients have got a few properties, obviously we chatted earlier about complex strategies and investing in finance. What is that for, I guess, for the layman or woman at home? What is complex strategies?
So I guess what we're looking for is lots of people don't understand what negative gearing is and also how they could potentially, if they're running their own businesses, that they need to have asset protection behind that. Should their, I guess, assets sit within a trust? Should there be different sort of trust measures in place to make sure the customer's protected, but also look at ways that they can grow from maybe one asset to 3 or 4 assets by looking at where are we buying? You and I have discussed this in previous times. Why are we buying there? How can we get capital growth and how can we turn that capital growth into more tax savings or more, I guess, properties for them in the long run?
Can you overcomplicate it sometimes? Like I deal with a lot of clients and typically sometimes they want to set up trusts and companies to begin with when really they just, I guess their first step is to save tax. At what stage during the process should you really start talking about setting up a trust?
Look, that's a really good question because it depends. If you were to come to me and it was your first property, I would not be recommending that we put that in a trust unless we knew that we had a huge amount of potential other income coming from somewhere else that we were trying to offset, because you won't get the personal tax savings within a trust. So what we need to do is look at, are you running a business? Are you running a company elsewhere where we're trying to move some capital gain or some capital loss to use the properties within the trust? If you were just coming to me for your first investment property, we'd be talking about how do we lower Steve's tax rate.
And what about, at the moment, we're going to talk about, I guess, rates. It's the topic. What have we got expected? Have we got another rate rise coming on the way?
I would assume that by the time we're finished this interview that we'll hear 0.25 has been announced by the Reserve Bank. So that's going to mean different things to different people, but what that does mean is it's a really good time to actually speak to your bank, to your broker, to see if you are on the best rate. If you're not on the best rate, how can they look at facilitating you? Or I know you've got some real estate agents coming on. It's a really great time if you're not in a position to hold that property. When's the right time to engage a real estate agent and make sure that you're going to market on your own terms, not on the terms of the bank?
So do you think with the rate rises coming through, that's actually going to push property prices down? Australia's sort of hitting a peak at the moment. Do you feel there's going to be a lot of people selling up or they're just going to hold out?
I think as many people as possible are going to attempt to hold. What will be interesting is we're seeing less stock to market, which is keeping the demand relatively high. So we haven't really seen property prices drop dramatically, but if we do see an influx of stock to market, you would potentially see that hit to the property price come in. I don't know what that'd be, but talking between 5 and 10%. So you could see that coming in the coming months as well.
So there's also, what I would hear then too, is also opportunity. So what happens if someone wants to refi? Do you want to talk to us a little bit about redraw, having funds available ready to go for the next property. What's the 3 steps that you take there?
Well, it's funny you mentioned this because this is one of the biggest things that I've been doing at the moment, which is people who are savvy investors, whether they're looking to do it in a complex structure or in a personal structure, getting ready for the opportunity that appears to be coming in the market. So what they're doing is they're going and talking to their brokers or their banks, making sure that they've got funds available so that they can pay a deposit on it, and they're having a pre-approval ready to go, meaning that when they want to pull that trigger, they've got a bit of confidence behind the fact that the bank's going to back them in on being able to complete that purchase, which means they're ready to go, we're ready to go. Simple and easy and stress-free transaction, truthfully, Steve.
Okay, last question for you. Budgets and saving tips. So should you pay yourself first? Should you pay your bills? What's a good way to actually save money? What's some of the things that you see when you go through someone's statement that they're just spending recklessly on?
All right, so my savings tips are, too many people I see who can't save are living out of one account. So one of the best strategies I can give people around savings is to have 2 accounts. You pay, or if you're self-employed or however you pay yourself, it goes into one account. Your bills, your living expenses are paid out of that account, and then you give yourself an allowance on a weekly or fortnightly basis, however you're going to do it, so that you don't breach what you're trying to actually save. So you can see your savings growing on a weekly or fortnightly basis. I guess where we see some people make mistakes is, and some of the things that I see really regularly is, Uber Eats is a massive one that people don't actually notice how much they're spending, and then all of a sudden I'll be like, hey Steve, you spent $900 last month on Uber Eats. So things like that, deleting apps from phones that make, I guess, spending money easy and accessible. We want to take that away from customers so that they're only doing what they need to do so that we can help them get to that dream really quickly.
Perfect. And I guess we'll add in another bonus question. Where do you see the hotspots being in Melbourne, Victoria? Where are you seeing a lot of transactions taking place?
All right, so transactions at the moment appear to be going more to the lower end from what I'm seeing. A lot of the savvy investors are seeing that there's property coming on the market, whether it's established or whether it's brand new, I guess, off the plan builds. We're seeing people who potentially bought off the plan 2 years ago, they can't afford them, they're coming back to market, and the savvy investors picking them up. So I'm seeing it more on the outskirts, the rim around Melbourne, what I would call the metro ring. We're seeing a lot of action around there where there's still a little bit of property, there's still a little bit of land that people can get into. We're not seeing as much in, say, your Kews, your Hawthorns, places like this. Those sorts of people are going, market's not where it needs to be, I'm just going to hold my property for now.
So with that outer ring being 20 to 30 kilometres, is that where you'd estimate that?
Yeah, I'd say around the 20 to 30. It depends on which side of Melbourne you're going out. I've got to admit, a lot of transactions taking place out in the Geelong side of town at the moment. There's a lot of development happening out there. A lot of savvy investors are getting in there at the moment now that market's cooled just a little bit.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for joining us, and thanks for coming on to the New Property Show.
No worries. Really appreciate your time, Steve.
I'm joined here by Gary Brown from Hatcher Advisory. Thank you for coming on. Well, you're a Be Back guest. Welcome back, Gary.
Thanks, Steve, for having me.
So we're going to actually create a regular segment for you, and that's going to be about finance, property, and wealth creation. Do you want to just talk to us about what's going to be happening in this season of the New Property Show?
I'm really excited to be here on the New Property Show, and we're going to be covering off on tax, property, wealth creation, looking at the different structures of how you can buy an investment property, whether it's a good time to buy one with rising interest rates, and some other really cool, exciting topics each week on the New Property Show.
Okay, so overall we're really hoping to cover around about 10 to 15 subjects. What seems to be, I guess, the top 3 that are really coming up at the moment? What are your clients talking to you about the most?
Yeah, I think the top one, the number one mistake that we're seeing investors make is getting the structure right. So they're thinking that they just have to buy a property under an individual name or a partnership with them and their spouse, and they're not thinking a bit broader out of it. So that's the number one problem what we're seeing, and we're looking to correct that with a description of how we're going to buy investment properties, how we should do it, the tricks and tips. Number 2 would be looking at buying investment property in a rising interest rate market and what that looks like today, because that's what we're all facing.
And 3?
And the third one we could look at is the different GST allocations to when we're selling a development or when we're doing a property development, doing a subdivision, how GST works and how we have to pay GST on a new residential build.
So should clients really be looking at, I guess, short-term gratification or a long-term plan? And give us an explanation if we're going to lean towards long. Is that a 3-year plan, or we're looking 5 to 10, or we're looking at generational wealth?
It's a great question. The Hatcher Way definition here of an investment property, the one that I stand by and have created, is to buy a property for the sole purpose of making capital gains while that property covers all its residential expenses, including the loan repayments. So when I look at those type of properties, I'm thinking 5 or 10 years, and I want to be able to get through any rises in interest rates and any unexpected expenses. So I'm always looking for the long term.
So Gary, so basically what you're saying here is you want to create protection for the client. You want to make sure that GST and accounting implications are taken care of. They're also taken care of in terms of their expenses and outgoing expenses, and also future-proofing them and making sure they're set up for a position to, I guess, reinvest. Is there anything I've missed there, or anything else that you want to share on this season that you think is going to be quite exciting, that's going to really come out of the woodwork?
I'm sure we're going to leave some amazing tips and tricks throughout the season, so I'll leave it for now, Steve.
Fantastic. Look forward to hearing from you on your segment on the New Property Show. We have Greg here from Methven Professionals. Greg, thank you for joining us on the New Property Show. Real estate, you've been in the industry for quite some time now, 25 years.
Yep.
Do you mind just sort of taking us back to what, I guess, inspired your passion to join the real estate industry?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having us on your show. I guess probably I was born into it, Stephen. Our business has been going for 60 years. My grandfather started our business. So I've grown up with it my whole life. I've been in the business 25 years, but property, real estate, we're in the outer east of Melbourne, and I guess discussions around our family dining room table over the years have always been property related.
What age were you getting out and actually checking out properties, doing open for inspections? Were you in the car with mum, dad, your grandfather, actually out on site back then?
I guess probably you just grow up with it. So I mean, even as in my early child years, we were going out putting up the sale signs and those sort of things. But probably more as I got older. I bought my first property when I was 20, just growing up with it. So just part of what we did.
There's been a lot of, I guess, buzz in the industry at the moment around real estate.
Yep.
A lot of people are buying, selling, refinancing. Where are you seeing, I guess, the hype of the activity in your version of the industry? What's happening?
Been a huge buzz, and I think probably the boom that we experienced during COVID, no one expected that. But the other thing is the boom, really in essence, we've had strong market conditions for probably close to 30 years. Yes, there's been a few ups and downs, but I think the market has been that strong for that period of time that it's almost been seen as the normal, and the last couple of years certainly added to that. Now there's a big change in the market. Obviously interest rates is having a big effect. Employment, we're at full employment as well at the moment, so people have been spending, but things are starting to change. So for the first time, and a lot of people that are in probably their mid-40s and younger have never seen a market change to where it is now, and prices starting to come back.
With, I guess, buying, how has that changed in the last couple of years? So with my experience in the industry, a lot of people were just driving out to display homes, they were turning up for open for inspections, and a lot of my clientele were coming, I guess, from a 30 to 50 kilometre radius. Has that changed now, and how are people purchasing? You're seeing a lot more online inquiries, or I guess the strategy's changed for buying a home?
I think probably the biggest shift is probably dollar driven. So if you take the first home buyer market as an example, so a first home buyer might have a budget or a spending capability to, let's say, $700,000. Well, the reality is if they want to buy a home, you can't get a $700,000 home, close to the city. So, those buyers certainly have had to have branched out, and whether that's, call it around the ring of Melbourne. But that's probably been the biggest shift. Where they find the property, I think that hasn't changed over the last period of time. Obviously your realestate.com, your internet. Social media is a big player. That's probably been one of the biggest shifts from a estate agent's marketing point of view, that now we'll promote property on social media, and that probably, if anything, that's replaced the local papers.
Okay, and do you actually use social media yourself to promote, or have you got a team that promotes that for you?
Correct.
Do you run that through a story or simply like a post, or how does that work?
Yeah, so combination, we use an external social media marketing company, then we do our own internal marketing also, and then we've got our own in-house video team as well. So, so the beauty of social media is you might know someone that's looking to buy a property, you mightn't be looking yourself, but you can find a property, you can tag it, share it, and away it goes.
Beautiful. So you basically create a team of mini agents that are on the ground for you.
Correct.
That like, know and trust you, helping you, support you. I'd like to cover, if we can, the rental market. Obviously noticed at the moment rental prices are kind of skyrocketing.
Yep.
To get into a rental property, you kind of need to know somebody. Sometimes you've got to buy and sell through the same agency to get approved.
Yep.
What's happening in the rental market?
It's probably the toughest I've ever seen it. So we manage a substantial number of properties in the Outer East. Our vacancy rate would be the lowest I've ever seen. I'm talking in 30, 40 years. So I think it's a combination of a number of things. I think with the market doing what it did as far as property values, investors looked at it and thought, you know what, now's the time to perhaps cash out. So a lot of them have elected to sell their property. So that's brought your stock levels down. Also, I think perhaps some of these rules that the state government has brought in around residential tenancies and how that affects in particular landlords. I think a lot of landlords are probably put off by some of those changes and are a little bit alarmed and scared as a result of those changes and actually having an investment property. So what we've seen is a lot of landlords have elected to cash out to sell their property. A lot of landlords haven't been buying back in, and it's created a huge shortfall. And unfortunately, probably the rules that the government brought in to protect the tenants, those same rules are actually probably hurting the tenants now because of the lack of stock available.
What about, house sharing or coexisting or Airbnbs? Are you starting to see those properties starting to come back on the market now because affordability is getting pretty tough? There's one person registering on a lease, and then you're finding when you go to turn up, there's 3 or 4 different people living there. Does that still happen?
Well, not as much as that we're aware of, put it that way. Not that I'm saying it doesn't happen. The Airbnb market, I think that's probably more for regional Victoria. I know the Airbnb or that holiday market is definitely affecting your regional market, and long-term rental properties are really hard to find. I think probably in the outer east of Melbourne where I'm based, I don't think that's so much of an issue. But as far as people house sharing and that, no doubt people were doing it because obviously the rents are coming back. The other thing that's interesting is people, when they're applying, a property might be advertised at $450 a week, but due to the demand and the amount of people that are looking, some tenants are coming in and offering $480 a week, or I'll pay 12 months up front. And they're just some of the things that the tenants are doing in order to secure a property.
All right, so here's the biggest question I'm sure everybody on the show wants to know.
Yep.
How do you make money in real estate?
Buy, hold, ideally don't sell. I think you got to look at property as a long-term proposition. I think you can play the market, but people say to me, when's the market at the top? Should I sell when it gets to the top? But the reality is no one knows. No one waves the flag when the market hits the top. Just like, for people that are looking to buy, maybe you're waiting for the real estate market to get to the bottom. You're not going to know when the bottom will be.
The race to the bottom, it never happens.
Correct. So I think if you just got to treat it as a long-term game. I know property developers will have a different thought around that, but that's a different space. But for the general mum and dad, I think if they're buying an investment property, buy and just hang on to it.
What about let's just dig a little bit deeper. Let's go for a mum and dad, or just a young ambitious person that's got a bit more of a budget.
Yep.
They might have that 700 to 1.2, 1.4 million.
Yep.
What about buying a bigger block of land and subdividing it? You've done some projects, I guess, yourself.
Yep.
Do you want to talk us through what that might look like?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good strategy. So in essence, you could buy, if you're taking the outer east of Melbourne, you might be able to buy a block of 900 to 1,000 square metres. It might cost you anywhere from 8 to 900,000. You can put a tenant into that property, you can rent it out. While you're renting it out though, you then work to then get an approved plan and permit to subdivide that property. By the time that might take 12, 18 months, 2 years, let's say, by the time you then build. And generally if you sit down and do the numbers, the cost that it actually costs to build the unit at the back, and then when you finance that, the rent will cover that, and you've probably made an equity of about 100 to 150,000 in equity, and then you'll also still got your front home as well.
And would you suggest typically a corner block, would you like that, or a wide frontage? What's your preference out of the two?
Either either. Look, corner blocks are always ideal, but you're going to pay more for a corner block as well, because obviously you'll get the unit that you build facing out onto the street. So, if you can get a corner block, great, but at the end of the day, you will pay extra for a corner block above, another dual lock type property.
Beautiful. Greg, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been really interesting topics. Loved hearing that the answer on making money in real estate. This show's here to help people, and thank you again for joining.
Welcome, Steve. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
All right, guys, interest rates. How does it affect the community and what can we do about it? Who's off on the panel today?
Well, interest rate is quite interesting, as you say, that I do not believe why government is increasing interest rate, because you know one thing, well, if there's a housing was an issue, well, produce more houses. It's like a concept, you having a shortage or limited food at home. What are you trying to say? By the way, everyone's going to have a small bite. But my question is, why can't we increase the food? I mean, increase supply. So I think worldwide, I never understand this concept. You put the inflation down and put the interest rate up. So this is where I think, in my personal view, I think we'll keep interest as a model, not too high, not too low, and increase more productivity, more land subdivisions, more housing, so it balances up everything. So like one day interest rate goes up 8-9%, then there's a government coming down and there's going to be now 2%, 1%. So I think the government should be encouraged to maintain a moderate level of interest and have a more supply so we can control it.
I think stability is very important in interest rate rise, increase or decrease, because if you have stability, then this time of uncertainty can be, people can manage that. If you have a stability in interest rate is very good, and it's all about getting the stability, and people can plan. Stability is the key. You have to have a stability. It can't just keep going up or keep going down, and you have too many variations. It's not about the variation. And other thing I want to add this to Steve is this interest rate increase. The argument we was taken from the government and RBI is we need to control the inflation. Man, inflation is not getting control. So why is this interest rate keep going up? If I can digest that. If inflation be in control because of the interest rate going up, yes, the argument is right, but that's not happening. Everything is going more expensive. Inflation is not controlled at all. So I think it has to be stable at some stage, so that people can afford things, afford this. All these things is about holding things, man. If you buy a property, you should be able to hold it. You buy a property, you buy a house, you buy a investment property to enjoy it, not to get stressed, not to get think, how do I pay, how do this. So I think there has to be some sort of stabilization.
So overall, I think what you're saying there is affordability in general. It's not just interest rates that are actually getting affected at the moment.
Living cost.
Yeah, living cost is really maybe almost the topic, and that's hence the question, what can we do about it?
I think if you're already in a mortgage, you've already got that loan, so you've already at the best of the RBA, then I think you've got to look at what interest rates you're paying currently, look at what the market is doing, look if there's a better rate out there, and go speak to your provider, because there are opportunities to refinance, to go into a fixed 1, 2, 3 year loans. You can look at all those different options to try to bring down or bring stability to your cost of livings.
Well, Gary, I would say this thing, I think it's kind of a trap. Is RBA have given people an easy go when there was 0.5%, 0.50 and 1%. Now suddenly going up. Those people who bought this property, that they would have a clue in future within 3-4 years time, we're going to increase the rate. There will be less buying, there will be less disaster. Now they've created a trap. Now there's a lot of 80,000 people have got a honeymoon, what do we call the price, the cheap. And now it's going to go within a couple of months' time. What's going to happen? I think there will be a lot of stress on the young families, on investors, and I think this is a bad planning, to be fair to say.
Yeah.
I was speaking to a few friends on Friday over a few drinks, and maybe this was the alcoholics talking, but they point out something really interesting that I hadn't really thought about a perspective before. And they asked, is the RBA and Governor Philip Lowe really in charge? Because raising interest rates is not a uniquely Australian phenomenon. It's a worldwide phenomenon, even more so in our neighbours across the ditch in New Zealand. Their interest rate rises started well before us, and they're significantly higher than us in order to control, the inflation that whatever happened over the last few years has caused. So I would say that I personally don't believe that the RBA is really in control of the interest rates, because the money it's getting at the end of the day comes from worldwide banks, comes from the IMF, comes from these people that have already dictated that the interest rates are going to get higher or lower as a worldwide trend. And the only thing we can do, aside from doing smart things like locking in our rates, is look at cash flow positive property that's not just cash flow positive to the tune of 4%, but we really need to look at cash flow positive now to the tune of 6-7%. And as part of that, we need to really look at, as investors, is a standard 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house going to be good enough as an investment anymore? Right? Is there something else we need to do? Like, I know you talk a lot about dual keys and dual occupancies. I'm a big fan of NDIS and shared accommodation. Those types of investments may be the way of the future from a control of interest rate perspective, because I don't see them going down till at least towards the back end of next year.
I think I want to add one thing in this. I mean, look, these interest rates and interest rate rising and all that, this is for first-time investors, new investors, first home buyers, all these things. This interest rate going from 3% to 5% or 6%, they got mostly impacted, the biggest impact on them. But people who are experienced investors, they have few investment properties, or they have a luxury homes, they have multi-million-dollar homes, it does not affect them too much, and it does not, even the inflation does not affect them too much, but it does in a longer term, because all the calculation they have on their investments and all this, it's got affected. But the biggest hit on the people who are new in the market, who have a limited source of income for them. But the reason for all these high-end homes, big homes like in Brighton, Toorak, and the only thing happened is they don't sell. They don't have to sell less, and because the buyer don't pay that much, they don't sell. So what's happening is the number of sales gone down, not the price. So where is controlling this interest rate increase? It's not controlling inflation, it's not controlling home prices, it's not controlling all that. So I think just keep some sort of stability and get people used to that, and start keeping it. Today increase another 0.25%. So if it's increase every month, it's not getting there. Just get it for few months like that. People get used to it, and then then that some sort of mechanism RBI have to work out. We are not economists, but we can just think that way.
I think
it has to get some sort of stability.
As an individual, you probably really need to be considering that at the end of the day. Like I understand it's a bit of a trap. Took years for the interest rates to come down. And only 6 to 9 months, and the interest rates have rapidly grown. I think probably one of the things that we, I guess, as Australians have to do right now is just buckle down, control our spending. Possibly looking at look, there's people out there that speak about selling your properties and downsizing. You can cause panic selling by doing that. I know some of our experts talk about that. I think buckle down, and probably maybe one of the solutions could be, you may need to look at renting a room out. If you've purchased a house and the repayments were $2,000 per week, $2,000 per month, and now they're up to $3,000 per month, you've got to find $1,000 per month. Rent out one of the rooms at $250, suck a little bit of pride, and become a rent investor anyway, and actually use this opportunity to learn how to think through it. Guys, this has been a really great segment. Obviously, we could talk for hours on this particular one, but great topics. Love to hear more also from our viewers with what they think they would do to actually get through the next 6 to 12 months. Look forward to having you guys back soon for another segment.
Sure.
Thank you. Sure.
That's all for this week, and thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week.